you're doing this game and you don't like the game of entrepreneurship, I mean, that's, this is a game of persistence, of endurance. It's a ultra marathon to the nth degree, right? I mean, if you want to succeed in entrepreneurship, you look at the big names out there, right? They weren't an entrepreneur for 3 years and then cash out, right? They were an entrepreneur for decades.
E-Mark and A-Mark is on.
What?
E-Mark and A-Mark is on.
Who?
Tell your friends, tell your dog, tell your mom.
Tell what?
E-Mark and A-Mark is on.
Oh, hey mom. E-Mark and A-Mark is on.
And we're back with another episode of E-Mark and A-Mark. And today we are joined by Brent Weaver, who is Chief Guru at uGurus. Brent, how are you today?
Dude, I'm doing awesome with that intro. Like, I'm solid.
Awesome. Well, it's great to have you. We were super excited to have you on. Heard from you earlier this morning here at Digital Marketer Headquarters in Austin, Texas. And that's right, everybody. We are not in a hotel room. Just want to make that clear. This is, I think, our first podcast not in a hotel room. Mm-hmm. So you have broken the streak, Brent. How does that feel?
That feels pretty amazing.
We even had Gary Vaynerchuk on this podcast, and he too was in a hotel room. You've managed to break our cycle.
You got Gary V in a hotel room.
We got Gary V.
That sounds like the start of a good story.
Oh, it was. But we're not going to tell you it. But let's kick this off, man. My belief in entrepreneurship is, and we've talked prior to this podcast while here at the training, but, as I was sharing with you earlier, what inspires me about entrepreneurs, business owners, CEOs, founders, etc., there's always a story behind what we know them as today. It's not like they were just born and then uGurus just came about. Like, you had to make that happen. There's a story behind that.
There is.
And a lot of times people can look at one's success and just, again, as we talked earlier, forget that person, screw that person. They're successful. They did it, and come up with all sorts of excuses as to why they could hate you. What's the story that made you who you are today in terms of the success you've had with uGurus?
Yeah, it's a successful business, like 25 years in the making. So, I think that, backstory is important. I started creating websites when I was 15. Whenever my parents talk to their friends or whatever, and they're like, oh, what does Brent do? Like, oh, he's an entrepreneur. And they're like, oh, when did you know he was an entrepreneur? And my parents always bring up the story of, I think I was 7 years old, and I was selling seashells on the beach for 10 cents, 25 cents a piece on the boardwalk. But the key thing here is I was selling them, and I was giving my cousins and my older brother orders to go find the quality seashells on the beach. So I had created a little bit of a team that was out there doing the work, and then I was just kind of the pitch man on the beach. So I think for me, like, entrepreneurship was never something that somebody sat down and said, here's how to be an entrepreneur, and this is what you should do when you grow up. It was more of like a not really fitting into the normal stuff that everybody else did, right? Like, I love to sell stuff, I love to create value and solve interesting problems. And the first, I guess, my former business partner and I, we started our web agency in 1999, 2000. So we were just a couple kids in high school, and we decided to make websites. It was better than getting paid minimum wage to stock shelves at a fabric store, and started picking up some clients at 17, 18 years old. This is early days of the web, kind of pre.com. And that evolved into a full-fledged, fully functioning agency with 300 plus clients. Dish Network was one of our clients, Anheuser-Busch InBev, hundreds of clients in the Denver metro region. I pitched over 1,000 website proposals and projects. And that was really like my undergrad in business, was getting an opportunity as a web designer to go into like countless different types of businesses, restaurants, chemical manufacturers, beer breweries, right? Distilleries, wineries, these tiny little food truck kitchens to these massive. We have a restaurant called Elway's in Denver that was one of our clients, $7 million per location, really big, high-end restaurant, right? So, like, I feel like that 13 years running the agency was really like getting my unofficial MBA in business.
What kind of kid were you in school? Were you the troublemaker? Were you the one people paid to write their papers for them?
Does that count as the same issue, right? Like getting in trouble for writing papers? No, I don't think. I think I did get paid to type some papers because it was like that transition between when kids didn't know how to touch type and I could, and so people would bring me their handwritten papers and I would type for them. No, I think I think I tried to stay out of trouble as much as possible, but I wouldn't say that I was a good student by any means. I definitely. I don't think I really applied myself in school very much. I loved to wait till the last minute to do things, which I think has benefited me greatly as an entrepreneur to be able to perform under like high pressure situations. Like getting into a situation being woefully unprepared, like I feel like I had a lot of training doing that, right? Like showing up to class and not having your homework done and having to figure out how to like navigate the situation with the teacher. Not the best example to set for the youth of today, but I think that some of that stuff that I got in trouble for, of like people being mad at you for failing or not doing well in the class, like being willing to accept that type of outcome, like nobody died, like we're still there, right? Whereas like some kids like that got straight A's, like they have such a high fear of failure that I don't think entrepreneurship ends up being like a really great route for them, where I feel like I had been exposed to a lot of failure. I think I did okay in a lot of my school and stuff like that, but there was definitely a lot of struggle with like homework and, studying and all that kind of stuff.
What was the vision you had for yourself as a kid growing up, whether that was middle school, now transitioning into high school? Of course, when you get into college, that usually kind of changes. But what was the vision you had for yourself? And what did you see yourself becoming?
When I got into like when I first built my very first website, it was 1995. It was a website where I posted bootlegged copies of some Fish. I don't know if you guys know the band Fish. Anyways, it's a jam band from the 90s or whatever, and they'd have these concerts and people would collect these tapes, and so my brother's girlfriend was a big Fish fan, and she wanted to trade these tapes with people. And so I basically created a webpage. It was like a Fish fan page, and I started posting these audio files of, this was kind of like around when Napster started becoming bigger, like 1999, kind of that kind of stuff. But like back in 95, like just getting some audio files online so that these other Fish fans could like download the music, and it'd probably take, an hour to download one MP3 or something like that. So I created this website, and all of a sudden, like people could connect. And it was like a drug. It was like, I need more of this. I need to create more of these websites, right? What can we build websites for? And it was like, my friends were into gaming. And so we built a PC review site where we'd review PC games. And then it was like, we had, that started taking off, and we needed to afford servers, and we needed to have, I'm 16, 17 years old. I have no money for servers. I went and called up this random web host, and they were like, to have a dedicated server to run this website based on your traffic is going to cost you, $200 a month.
So back in 95, you saw yourself doing this type of, marketing, the work you're doing now, you saw yourself doing that. And were your parents supportive? Did they say, this internet
first of all,
thing.
I don't know if I knew what the word marketing was.
Mm-hmm.
I was definitely more on the web geek side of the equation, right? I mean, I was HTML. I think at the time it was like coding in Perl and CGI scripts and PHP and stuff like that was where I was at, like total geek. I don't think I really realized that I liked the business side until much later. In terms of parental support, I think my parents have all the love in the world for me. Were they like really excited that I was building websites and, coding instead of, working on my geography homework or my pre-calculus or whatever? Like, I don't think so, right? I mean, I think they're like, hey, you're putting all this work into like programming books. Like, could you put that same work over here into school? And so I think that'd be hard for a parent, right? You've got the expectations of do well in school and then do whatever you want after that. And I was kind of like, yeah, but I'd rather do this stuff over here, right? And so I think for them, we started our business officially founded our LLC when we were seniors in high school. You could probably see very clearly like my grades were slipping, but we were making money. And I'm sure that was hard for my parents, right? To be like, you need to do well in school and get a good job. And I'm thinking, no, I need to make more websites and build a business and, and get big clients, and I can be successful without that.
So at that point, you're a senior in high school, you have this successful business, that's growing that I'm sure most of your peers didn't have that. They were probably focused on sports or academics, other things, not so much business and
Girls, whatever
else it may be. So it comes time, end of senior year. What do? Do you go off to college? Do you start the business? Do you keep growing the business? What do you do?
Man, that expectation, at least where I lived and where I grew up, like to go to college was really strong, and I did for sure. So we. I think I thought it might be an option to not go to school and focus on the business, but like that programming of like, you must go to college, you must get a 4-year degree, you must get a job, like is really, really strong. So I went to school in Boulder, Colorado. My business partner went to school in University of Texas down here in Austin, and we kept the business going on the side. So during the summers, we'd go back to Plano, Texas, where we're from, and we would get an office space, and we'd work all the way through, the summer, picking up some clients, making some money, and then we'd kind of maintain that business throughout the year. And it was kind of hot and cold, right? Sometimes we'd be like really into the business, doing it, making some money on the side during school. Sometimes it'd kind of be like it'd fall to the wayside, and I'd get into my studies, and that kind of went on and off. It was like a teeter-totter for 4.5 years. And finally, it was like my last semester. I was like, what do I want to do with my life? Do I want to go do this business thing, or do I want to finish my economics degree and go get a job? And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do the business thing. So last semester just kind of stopped going and haven't looked back.
Yeah. Something, Brent, and this is me just being completely honest. Sometimes prior to getting into what we know as entrepreneurship today and what all that involves, and just really the day in and day out sacrifice of sometimes not getting a lot of sleep. Sometimes, knowing you have a big goal and you want to be successful and you want to grow this huge agency, you want to have multiple customers, have a lot of employees, et cetera, and it's just the grind day in and day out. But if I'm being honest, prior to getting into entrepreneurship, whenever I'd hear stories of people making it and them saying, oh man, my life was just so hard, and, I just didn't get sleep, and I had no money. I was down to $3. I was down to, just $1,000. In my mind, I'm like, how the fuck do you get to that little money? Like, what the hell are you doing? Like, in my mind, I'm like, you are such a liar, because that just was not my reality. So I'm just thinking they're lying, trying to make their story seem very appealing. But we've lived this now. We've been to the point where we're looking ourselves. So payroll's coming in a week. What are we going to do? Do you have an idea? Nope. And, we're just flying by the seat of our pants. And, something with entrepreneurs is you always figure it out. Connect with the entrepreneurs that are listening to this right now. What was your day today on a very micro level like?
Like early on with the business?
Early on.
And I would say, like, I think that being an entrepreneur and getting into this game now is way better than it was. I'm not gonna say it's easier, but I think it is better than it was 20 years ago. I think what you have in terms of social media, what you have in terms of content, that, like, we had MySpace. Like, I don't know if you remember MySpace, but like that wasn't a great, like, thriving business community of growth-minded entrepreneurs trading like really highly valuable content, right? There were no podcasts, right? I mean, you had books that you'd go to Barnes and Noble and you'd like browse the business section, and that was that, right? Like, I read some good books and stuff like that, but I do feel like entrepreneurship as like a community has changed because of social media. It's changed because of, podcasts like this, people putting a lot of energy into publishing this information, being able to make equipment like this somewhat cost effective. Like, to create a radio station 20 years ago, like, would have been a really costly endeavor. So I think that to some extent that's helped things along. I think when I was, I'm trying to remember back to like 22, 23 years old, right? I mean, like, how do you get through it?
What was your daily like?
You eat macaroni and cheese, you eat hot dogs. I remember one time we literally, we wanted to go out and drink and hang out with our friends that all had like corporate jobs, and they could all go out and hang out, and we felt left out. So I remember like pulling off the couch cushions and literally scouring the house for change so we could go out with friends. And we would go buy, a 40 because like that was a cheap way to get drunk, right? And we would, go have our 40 and then we'd go meet our friends out, right? So that's not a really glorious lifestyle type thing, but the reality is like you figure out and make it work. The one thing I would say is, being 23, not having a family, not having, a spouse or kids, it takes some things off the table. And so the risks, while it sucks to not have any money in your bank account, it sucks to be able to sit there and go, okay, I gotta like eat all of my food down to like the bare minimum, and then we'll get this check from a client, and then we can like go buy some food, or go out and party with your friends, and then realize, wow, I just totally screwed up. But I think that that was it was like almost a manic depressive state in terms of finances, right? You'd get a big paycheck from a client and you'd have this image of what success was as an entrepreneur, and you'd like celebrate or buy stuff or whatever, but then you didn't have the marketing systems, you didn't have the sales systems to get that repeat business. And so it was very like up and down, like we would run out of money and be like, wow, we don't have any money for 2 weeks, but then we'd get money and we'd like spend it or whatever, or we'd take some checks and stuff like that. But I think the reality was it was like messy. It was all over the place. I remember I had, this is probably getting into too much detail, but like literally I was strategically overdrafting my account, right? Like once it got down to a certain level, I'd be like, bam, like we're going to get $35 or $38 charge regardless. So I'm just going to charge like the maximum amount, and like take out, like I'm going to take out $500. I'm going to overdraft my account by $500 because I'm going to get hit with $38 regardless. So I might as well get hit once with $38 and then like spend the money versus, get hit with like $8. When you're strategically
That's actually
structuring,
a good strategy.
Really right, when you're strategically structuring.
I don't recommend it, but
your overdrafts or whatever, like, you're not in like a great situation as far as that goes. I mean, I think that like for me at that time, one of the biggest mistakes, like looking back on it, was not, really getting a solid like mentor relationship earlier. It was not, going out of my way to build relationships with other businesses that were like mine, looking at other agencies, looking at other people that were doing what I was doing in Denver, in Colorado, in the United States, nationally, right? And not making, reaching out and saying, hey, here's a successful business owner. Like they are where I'd like to be. And I'm going to reach out to them and I'm going to build a relationship with them. I'm going to figure out what they're doing that makes that work, or at least get some of that emotional support. We operated as an island, and that was painful. We made a lot of mistakes that were, I think, easily avoidable, that I could have, saved a lot of time with and not had to go through that type of stuff. But again, I go back to, we had very little responsibility outside of our business. If I was a father, if I was a husband, and I had $3 in my bank account, like it's categorically a different situation. Like, would I go and, be putting my resume out there, right? Like, would I have let it get to that point? Like, I probably wouldn't, like, to be totally honest. Like, but when you're, 23, 24, and you don't have that responsibility, and you can go to your landlord and be like, I don't know, dude. I don't have rent. Like, what do you kick me out? Like, whatever. Yeah. Like, I'll go live with my parents, or I'll go crash on a friend's couch, or right. I think those options are off the table, right? And I do think though that has created a different pressure to succeed that is way more powerful than like fear or desperation, right? Of having that obligation to a family. And I thought for a while, like, oh man, I'm gonna have a family. I'm not gonna be able to work as much. I'm not gonna succeed as much. But it's been the exact opposite, right? All of a sudden I have these bumpers in my life. I can't work past 5. I can't start working till 8. I can't be up till, 2 o'clock in the morning working late. I gotta take care of my family. I gotta have that responsibility. And that's actually pushed me to be, I think, more successful than I was prior to that.
So it's like you strategically, whether it was strategic or not, your situation, it definitely afforded you the opportunity to be able to push yourself beyond the limits of, having to answer to someone, having to answer to your family. You had the freedom to do what you want, whether that was, all right, I'm going to spend all my money on growing this business and not having to buy diapers or, buy milk or whatever that thing would be. So is that what you think most people are missing? It's the aspect that it's a choice. I mean, you can't do what somebody else does because you're just not in the same situation as they are, correct?
Yeah. I mean, look, when when we sold our agency, in 2012, and we were going to start this new business. We knew that we were going to need to spend. I needed to make a certain amount of money to pay rent and ultimately pay a mortgage. My wife and I had just gotten engaged at that time, right? There was and she was in school, and there was obligations, right? So our plan of attack was a little bit different. It was hey, let's take some of the money from our acquisition and let's put it into the business account so that we can, we'll have this war chest of cash. And then we'll have a burn. We'll be able to take a salary from the business, and we'll be able to kind of burn through that. We took on 5 other outside partners in the business, got some investment money, right? So the strategy was totally different. It was hey, we need to be able to have a minimum level of support in the business. So we got what they call OPM, other people's money, and we made that happen, right? And at certain times, because we needed to maintain certain levels of lifestyle and obligation, we took on loans for this or that or debt strategically, which were just decisions that we didn't really think about or know was possible. When we first started our business, we weren't taking on investors, right? It was whatever money we had in our bank account, that was it, right? Which I think creates a certain bootstrapped mentality, which is good, but at the same time, it can slow things down. It can make things maybe a little bit harder than they need to be. If you've got a good idea, you've got a good vision, a good team, there are ways to raise money. There's ways to get the oxygen that you need in your business.
Do you wish you had done that, gone that route and borrowed money, gotten capital versus struggling through? It sounds like that's what you did.
I mean, there's definitely pros and cons to both. I think that if I'm gonna go back and play Monday morning quarterback on the bad times in our business, I think that it would just be more. I think there'd be different decisions I'd go back and try to change, right? And more of that would be around getting out of certain seats earlier, keeping our focus on a more strategic play in our business versus hey, whoever contacts us can be our client and we'll just work with whoever, right? I think that we had certain niches and certain areas where we were making a lot of money, and we could have easily just looked at that and said, hey, why don't we just do that thing over there, right? Why don't we just do that type of work? And instead of chasing every lead, I was in such a mentality of need and desperation, I think, for a while with our agency, that we're literally, if there was a prospective web design client that moved, I would put my 100% effort into chasing them, whether they had $500 in their pocket or $50,000 in their pocket, I would chase them. And I think that those were things that, with age and a little bit of training, it was hey, you know what? We probably shouldn't have gone after $1,000 websites, right? We were selling websites for 20, 30, 40, 50 grand. We probably should have said, hey, this is our bar. If you don't have this, see you later.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I think that's a perfect segue into kind of where I want to go with the remaining time here today. When I hear your name, Brent Weaver, I instantly think of the $10,000 website. In my mind, that's what's branded. And I think if you were to Google your name, you'd find a lot on the $10,000 website. And for me, when you stood up on stage today, kind of took me back, kind of hit me viscerally and took me back 6 or 7 years ago when I was really just getting started with the marketing company and was selling those $500 websites. I mean, I remember the first package I had was a $500 unlimited page website, advanced SEO.
Ooh. That's an offer, man.
Oh yeah, it was a deal. Forever hosting. Ooh. No recurring revenue in there, just a $500 all-inclusive, all-you-can-eat package. And I wasn't making money, and I couldn't figure out why. I mean, I was struggling to make rent, struggling to make it, and I started Googling how to make money selling websites. And what do I find? I find Brent Weaver and start looking into, you said you should be selling websites for $10,000. I said, there's no fucking way.
Who's going to spend that?
I mean, I read that. I'm like, this guy's crazy. 10 grand for a website. But then I started watching your free content, consuming what was out there and said, you know what? Rather than saying it's not possible, let's see if it can be done. And slowly started creeping up the price to $1,000, $2,000, and eventually getting to that $10,000 price point of selling websites for that and much more. And I'm just curious where that came from. Where did you come up with that, okay, we can charge $10,000 for a website when so many people are doing what I was doing, is the $500,000 all-you-can-eat packages?
Yeah, you mean $500? Yeah. I think that, well, first of all, our program helping people to sell a $10,000 website. What I saw time and time when we were doing coaching and training with people, was I think a mindset issue around like I would see people going through our 10-week program for selling your first 10K project, and they'd be like, "Hey Brent, I want you to look at this proposal for me." I'm like, okay, let's check it out. Like I'd open it up and kind of look over like the cover page and some of the objectives, and I'd go through the scope of work, and then I get to the investment page, and like here it would be, right, all the scope of work, kind of value stack all the way up to let's call it a $11,000 proposal, and then there'll be like a line item that says like discount, $1,120 for a total price of $9,850, right? Please don't math check me on that one. But basically, somebody would, I'd be looking at it and I'd be like, you're like literally in a program to sell your first $10,000 project, and you're literally like you're underbidding that from a mindset perspective, like by $100. I'm like, what's the deal? And people would be like, oh man, I don't think this client's gonna pay me over $10,000. I'm like, you don't think the client, or like you don't, but like you have an issue with that number? Do you think the client has an issue with the number, or do you think you have the issue with the number, right? And people would be like, oh man, yeah. I was like, why don't you just make it like, just to like make it 10-5, just to like break through the. And I think that for some people, like you get stuck in this like mindset thing, and I know from my own perspective, like I did, right? Like I got into this feeling, and it's interesting for my story. We were selling 20 and 30,000 websites, and then we started chasing everything, and our prices started getting lower and lower and lower, to the point where we thought the solution to all of our problems, to scaling up our web design business, was offering $1,000 website, because we're like, all these people, like nobody wants to buy a $10,000 website or a $20,000 website. Let's just create $1,000 websites, and we'll just create, we'll just crank them out like crazy, right?
Quick templates.
So we started there, it went up, and then we ended up going down because we just kept chasing and chasing and chasing. And finally, I was like, I just looked at how much time we put in. Like, regardless if it was a $1,000 project or a $30,000 project, magically they took the same amount of like mind share. They took the same amount of work. And so, we were like, you know what, like, why don't we just do 10K, plus projects? And, we started to kind of have standards. We're like, oh man, we got to qualify. Like, we can't be, going after a client that doesn't have the budget or the means, right? And so we started learning how to sell. We started learning how to qualify. We started learning how to take people through discovery, and kind of building ourselves back up, right? It actually was at a conference for, after we had sold our agency, and I had been kind of through that whole process, like that roller coaster of having, high value sites all the way down to these, we will be scalable at 1,000, which doesn't work. For anybody that's listening, like, okay, maybe you can make that work on a recurring model, but generally speaking, $500,000 websites, $2,000 websites just does not scale. But it was actually a conference that a friend of mine, Eben Pagan, was putting on years ago, and it's like sometimes you have that moment where somebody says something on stage and it like connects with you. And we had been doing a lot of customer development with agency owners. We had been talking to them a lot about what they were struggling with. We were trying to come up with product ideas, and he was like, you got to solve a problem. And it was like something I'd heard a million times. Like, of course you got to solve a problem. Right. It's like, what problem do people have? I'm like, man, I had a problem like selling $10,000 websites. I was like, what if we created a program? And that was it. That was the goal. Like, help you sell your first 10K project, right? And I remember going back to my hotel room and calling my business partner at the time, and I'm like, hey, let's do a boot camp, help people sell $10,000 projects. Like, I know I can do that because like we went through the process. We have like tons of material on that. We went from selling high value sites to low value sites, and then back up to where no project that we did was less than 10K. I'm like, we can help the market with that problem.
Where does niching fall into that? How important is it to discover a niche and hone in on that, or is it okay to just do websites for anybody?
Yeah, man. So I think that where does niching is the whole pie, right? It's the whole thing. So look, I mean, I think if you're struggling to make a living in your business, I'd almost look at niche as synonymous with the word strategy or plan, right? All we're saying, at least initially, is you need to have a strategy for how you're approaching your market. And the first question you have to ask, the people ask me all the time, is like, where do you find $10,000 clients, right? Like where do you find them, right? And I don't think you're going to answer that question very easily unless you know who. And if you can answer the who question, the where becomes insanely easy, right? And I do this with people live all the time. They'll be like, I'll be like, I don't know where to find clients. And I'm like, cool, I'll pull up a browser and we'll just start Googling, right? Like it'll be like a niche, like, registered dietitians. It's like, all right, cool. Where do registered dietitians hang out? The person will be like, well, I don't know. I heard there was cool. Like we pull up registered dietitian conference, registered dietitian association, registered dietitian blog, how to make money as a registered dietitian, registered dietitian social media influencers, right? And you just start to we call it a market map exercise, right? And you start to map out the market, and then you just start following these little rabbit holes, and all of a sudden you start discovering associations, trade groups, conferences, people that have 25,000 followers in that niche. You start reaching out to them and saying, hey, you look like you run a community for registered dietitians. Do you ever help people out with web design and branding? And they'll be like, oh man, that's one of the number one things people bring up. Like, let's have you on and do a webinar, right? All of a sudden you go from, I don't know where to find clients to now we have a market map with lots of clients that we can go after, right? So if you're looking for the quick fix, sales is a great way to do it. Teaching people how to, talk to clients more effectively, sell deals for a little bit more money than they otherwise would have. Like sales, great quick fix. The long-term fix, it's strategy, right? It's helping somebody to figure out who's their market that they can go after, who's the market that they can really own as a business, and it's a lot more fun. Like my market that I serve is digital agency owners, right? Like I know where to go find my customers. Like we're down here at Digital Marketer. I gave a talk. Right after my talk, I had 20 leads in my inbox, right? It makes life a lot easier. Like I'll get on a plane, go back to Denver tonight, and I've got 20 leads in my inbox from coming down here and doing one day of content, right? I mean, that's a lot easier than not knowing where the heck to go to find my people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, to close it out today, if there are any struggling agency owners out there, how best should they connect with you, or what would be their next step?
Yeah, I mean, we have a treasure trove of resources on our website at uGurus.com. That's UGURUS.com. We have our own podcast. We'll have to have you guys on there as well soon, called The Digital Agency Show, so you can check that out. If you guys are interested to learn more, or if you want to book a call with myself or our team, just shoot me an email, brent@ugurus.com.
And Brent, I can't let you get away without having you answer this question, because it's very, very important to me to get your feedback on this. So people think sometimes that you need to go to college. You need to have an education. Specifically, you need to have a degree to make it in this world. You're an entrepreneur, whether you had a degree or not. You have a successful business, so you can kind of scratch that piece of paper now because it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So how important is the whole aspect of going to college and getting that degree? Does that play a role into major success versus just going out there hustling, knowing what you want, getting around the right people, going to the right conferences, reading the right books, and just really pursuing that path of entrepreneurship and everything that comes with it? Or is it more important to go to college, get that degree, go work for somebody for 50 years, get a retirement?
I feel like my mom's going to listen to this podcast and she'll be like, what's he going to say next? He better say the right answer. No, that's not how my mom talks. Look, I think that if you are somebody that has some certain level of drive, and you're going into a business, like I was going into like web design and in the late 90s and early 2000s, like was there even a degree program for people like me? Like not really. Like I could have gone to school for computer science. I think that in this space where it's a little bit like the Wild West, like there aren't really much rules in terms of like building web apps or SaaS applications. I don't think that a degree necessarily gives you any kind of unfair advantage in the marketplace if you're going to become an entrepreneur. Now, if you're a neuroscientist and you need to like open up people's skulls and you need to like poke them with electrodes to create some new medical device, then you probably need to go get a college degree, because you probably can't, get the certifications and the diplomas or whatever to do that kind of stuff. So I think there's definitely a place for degrees and certifications and things like that. And so I think it just depends. Now, if you don't know what you want to do, then I think dropping out of school because you watched some Peter Thiel video about how he thinks that, you should start a business or whatever, or Gary Vaynerchuk thing about how you should go pursue your influencer or your Instagram follow. I think that can be really dangerous for people that really don't know where they want to go. And a college degree might, give them the time to figure it out and study different things and learn how to learn. I did go to school for just as long as a lot of my friends did that got degrees. So I think I learned how to learn. I had time to kind of grow up. And so I didn't end up getting that piece of paper. If I would have gone into any career, or if my business, for whatever reason, implodes on me and I need to go get a job and, I need access to a degree, like that's going to suck. Now, I hope that never happens. I have no intentions of ever getting like a real job. But like the reality is like, there are doors that will close, right? It just so happens that I think I was lucky enough that the path that I pursued, in a weird way, not only does it not require degrees, but it kind of like in a weird way kind of celebrates this idea of like, buck the system and, you don't need a degree to succeed, right? The Steve Jobses, right, don't have degrees. The Bill Gates don't have degrees, right? They're kind of the classic archetype, dropped out of school, made $1 billion, right? But there's a lot of people that drop out of school that do not become successful, right? So I think that there's not really correlation there in the slightest, but I think it's, it's like follow what you want to do. If you want to do something different, like if you want to start a business and really go for it, not just tell your parents you're doing that, then, maybe school isn't right for you.
Mm-hmm. And we'll close out with this. We were talking earlier today, and you said something that has really stuck with me. I had asked you the question, if an entrepreneur were to talk to you today and you were never to see them again the rest of your life, but you had the opportunity to say one thing to them that was going to potentially alter and change the course of their life, you said, in summary, you said you'd say something to the extent of, always pursue your dream and not the money.
Yeah, well, I think
that's so powerful.
Finding the joy in what you do, right? I mean, I think that's the big part, right? It's like if you're doing this game and you don't like the game of entrepreneurship, I mean, that's, this is a game of persistence, of endurance. It's a ultra marathon to the nth degree, right? I mean, if you want to succeed in entrepreneurship, you look at the big names out there, right? They weren't an entrepreneur for 3 years and then cash out, right? They were an entrepreneur for decades. And so I think if you don't enjoy the day-to-day, if you don't enjoy that grind and that hustle, you don't find the magic in those places, it's going to be a long and painful ride. But if you find happiness in it, like this kind of stuff, guys, I mean, this is awesome, right? I mean, this is where the magic is. And it's also, staying up till 2:00 in the morning and putting that finishing touches on a presentation or on, working on that proposal late at night. Like if you can find the joy in those moments, then it makes this whole thing way easier.
Brent, founder and CEO of uGurus, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys. It's been awesome.